Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vaisha Chaudhary, and I would like to welcome you all for today's session of Spare India Academy. And I welcome all the participants here and the esteemed panelists who have joined today. So, Spare India Academy was launched on 10th April 2020. It is a collaborative initiative of WHO, UNICEF, WFP, and HCL Foundation, along with other organizations, with the mission to enable humanitarian aid and frontline workers across India. In the past 2 years, we have conducted 270 academy sessions through COVID-19 Academy, which saw around 1.5 lakh participants and 684 unique resource persons who delivered this session in the past 2 years. For today's session, we Spare India would like to commemorate the World Press Freedom Day through the panel discussion today on the role of media in disaster management, wherein experts will discuss different aspects of the relationship between media and disaster response agencies, the roles and responsibility of media fraternity with a disaster management perspective. For today's session, a very eminent set of panelists have joined, and I would like to take a brief moment to introduce all of them. First of all, Mr. K.G. Suresh. He is a Vice Chancellor of Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University of Journalism, Bhopal. He is a senior journalist and has served as Director General, Indian Institute of Mass Communication, Senior Consulting Editor with Doordarshan News, Founder Dean of UPES, Chief Political Correspondent with Press Trust of India. He is also a recipient of many prestigious awards, including Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi Award. The second panelist here today is Mr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra. He is a senior editor in political and current affairs with NDTV India. He has extensively reported and researched on issues related with climate related disasters like floods, legal rights of disaster victims, threats posed by climate change, the sustainability of development processes and industry, potential impact of COVID-19 pandemic on sustainable development goals, and Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction 2015 to 2030 targets. We welcome you, sir. Next is Shweta Ranjan ma'am. Shweta Ranjan has more than 18 years of experience in the world of journalism, spanning across the spectrum of electronic and print media. She is a well-known anchor on TV channels and has created a niche for herself in TV programming, reporting, script writing, and channel administration. Ma'am's contribution to Indian journalism has been widely recognized and has been bestowed upon the prestigious award like Indira Gandhi Priyadarshini Award for Excellence in Field of Journalism and Best Journalist Award. We welcome you, ma'am. Next with us is Mr. K.A. Shaji. He's a senior journalist of South India. He's a South India-based journalist who reports regularly on political development, environmental issues, health, livelihood, Dalit issues, tribal affairs, art and culture, and development disparities. He is now working in areas of social advocacy and grassroots developments. He has won a National Media Fellowship from the National Foundation for India in 2005 for excellence in journalism, and also won the Sanskriti National Journalism Award in 2009. We welcome you, sir. Next with us is Major General Mk Bengal. He is the former executive director with NIDM. He was commissioned into Corps of Army Air Defense in December 1985, an alumni of National Defense Academy. Sir is a graduate of Defense Service Staff College and has attended prestigious higher command courses at the Army War College, beside excelling in all the other career courses in Army. He has an academic background of defense, strategic study, and defense and management studies. During his more than 3 decades of service, he has held important command and staff assignments. Now, I would like to introduce the moderator of today, Mr. Omkareshwar Pandey. He is the CEO and Editor-in-Chief of Indian Observer Post. He is an eminent journalist, author, and thought leader who has over 30 years of experience in all four major verticals of media, that is print, TV, digital, and news agency. Being 9 times in the distinguished position and role of editor, Mr. Pandey has covered all top union ministries, political parties, parliament, and has also been on foreign assignments in several countries during his career. We welcome you, sir, and I would like to request you to take over the session from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. Very good afternoon to you all. This is Omkareshwar Pandey. I am here to moderate the Sphere India Academy webinar on the occasion of World Press Freedom Day. Our esteemed speakers will be shedding some very valuable light on the topic which is decided for today. And you all know that this topic is very, very close to our hearts. The disaster responsive reporting by media, challenges and way forward. So before I say something about the today's topic, let me first of all welcome all our panelists and exclusively Major General Mk Bengal sir, who is a former director of NIDM, Ministry of Home Affairs, who has been instrumental in formulating the policies related to disaster management in his career in the NIDM as executive director. He's a very senior officer, and I'm very, very thankful to him. He came on a very short span of time, and we could have missed him if he would have not here. So we would have missed a important part of listening his views on the role of media. So I especially welcome him, and I welcome all our panelists, including Mr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra, Shweta Ranjan, K. Shaji already are our speaker has already introduced all of them. So welcome you all. So today, this year, the historic event of the World Press Freedom Day makes a clarion call to all media persons and draws our attention towards the ethics and practices of disaster reporting. So we all are pre-informed about the topic of the day, disaster responsive reporting by media, challenges and way forward. So first of all, it is essential that we acknowledge that the most important role is being played by our media during the disaster, whether it was Bhuj or tsunami or even the going COVID-19. But on the other hand, we have also seen how disaster reporting by a section of the media has been full of hysteria, hype, misinformation, and biases. For example, the recent reporting by some of the media organizations in regard to Russia-Ukraine war were not only sad and unfortunate, they were also misleading and intended to divide the audiences in favor or against one of the warring countries. A recent advisory by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India, says that several satellite TV channels have carried out coverages of events and incidents in a manner which appears to be unauthentic, misleading, sensational, and also using socially unacceptable language and remarks. So this advisory came in the wake of not only Russia-Ukraine war, but also in the backdrop of the violence which happened in some parts of Northeast Delhi. So they have been warned that government has warned them to be cautious of content provoke religious sentiments or which promote communal attitudes. So today what many media reporters resort to is sensationalizing content and spreading hate and partisan attitudes. The result is mass hysteria and negative reactions and hardened stands among the citizens. In case of any defamatory, deliberate, false, and suggestive, innuendos and half-truth, serious actions has been warned by the government of India. So we need to understand that the common man's psyche is easily influenced, and media is the fourth pillar of democracy that has the sheer power which can either make or break. So media's role is always going to be like the word of a Masiha, whose words mesmerize the audiences in the same way as opium keeps people intoxicated. So I would like to open this discussion today by inviting Major General Manoj K. Bengal, first of all, to share his views, what he thinks about the today's role of the media, and what is how do you analyze media coverages during different disasters based on your experiences, and what is your view on the primary roles and responsibilities of media during disasters? Major General Manoj K. Bindal.
Thank you, Dr. Karashwar. It is really nice that such a program is being organized now when the whole planet, I'll say, not only India, is battling with the disaster-related issues, be it climate change, environmental issue, and no better day to talk about the role of media in disaster management than on the Press Freedom Day. You have already quoted examples of how the media has not reported properly, but I'll first give some examples where media has been instrumental in improving the disaster preparedness, disaster response, and rehabilitation. During 2014 Kashmir floods, I was present there when the floods happened, and I was at the airport itself handling the relief as well as the rescue operations. And that time, whole lot of media people came in, and they came and asked me, "Sir, where do you want us to go so that we can help you better?" Now, that is responsible reporting. So the gray areas or the areas, dead areas that we say where we didn't have surveillance or we didn't have information, we send them on boats. And they gathered such useful information that next day a heli drop was done. We sent relief to those places, people who did not have the wherewithal to reach the right authorities. And that is responsible media. Similarly, in Bhuj earthquake also, certain media was doing exactly what you said, but there was a section of media which was doing search operations on behalf of the authorities and reporting to us. That time I was again posted in Bhuj, and my own house had come down. Luckily, my family had survived. And I had gone out with the very first column which moved out into the Bhuj town for rescue and relief. And the journalist, there was a local journalist there. I'll not give a name right now. He came to me, "Sir, I have lost everything, but tell me, how can I help?" I told him, "You go to your own area and tell us if you find anyone trapped." And he did that. And in the bargain, we saved nearly 3 lives in that particular area. So a journalist's role is to help the public in the disasters. He is the bridge he is the link which bridges the gap between the givers and the takers. That is, givers are the authorities, whether it be government agencies, or anyone who's got a wherewithal, to the affected victims. And that is exactly the role they should play during a disaster. Nothing more, nothing less. In that, some challenges which I found which needs to be taken care of is lack of knowledge of disaster management. I have seen so many media persons coming up during various response time who had no clue as to where they should start, what they need to do, what they need to report on. Sometimes they wasted time in going into an house trying to show what all damage has taken place, saving precious time wherein they could have helped the authorities and guided them towards an area which was not looked into, or due to paucity of information, no one had gone there that time, or someone was in dire need. So training of media personnel on disaster management issues is the most important aspects to make them responsible. So it has to become an inherent part of their curriculum, and every media discourse, there should be a lecture on disaster and media, no matter what the topic is. They should know what are the right questions to ask. They should know where to go, what to look for. They should know the organization that is there in that state or in the country, which is responsible for disaster management, and whom they can fall back on to get help to the area where they're reporting. It overnight, these issues don't come up, and at that point of time, the officials who are dealing with media, not dealing with media, dealing with the disaster, do not have time to educate the media as to what. They can only point them in a direction. That's all. Then media has to do their own job. Now, I'll again give you one more example. Southern India, even though we are reeling under so much of heat wave today, but Southern India is likely to get rains in another 30 days' time. And we are going to have flood-related issues. In 2005, when the Mumbai floods, urban flooding took place, everyone was caught by surprise because the stormwater drainage system, the sewer water drainage system got clogged, and hence the flow of water was not up to the required standard. Also, the reason was that too much of rainfall had happened, precipitation, in a very short period of time. But thereafter, what happened? Now, every year, Mumbai starts getting flooded, but the effect is not so much, even though the intensity of the rain is much more than 2005 rainfall, because a month prior, the media starts making noises as to what all has been done. Have they done this? They start drawing on the lessons learned of the previous flooding and start putting that on the TV. So they then force everyone to start preparing for the impending floods, which is likely to come. So now, here you're talking about responsiveness, I'm talking about proactiveness. So there are times which is called non-disaster phase, or a time which is pre-disaster phase, where the media should start drawing attention to the things which is supposed to be done. It is not possible for any government to look into these matters 24/7. Many things happen only when it is required. And media is the right place where they can draw the attention of everyone concerned, hold them accountable, and make them work for the community. And that is where the service to the nation by the media will be very, very successful. During disasters, the efforts should not be to show gory pictures or gory images or too much of failure. It should be progressive. It should be a prescriptive reporting where their showcasing of any issue leads to a solution. So we have problems in media reporting because of various agendas that people have. But nevertheless, when it comes to saving human lives, I think all that should be cast aside, and reporting should be to ensure that the affected people get the right relief, whether in terms of rescue operations, evacuation operations, or relief materials, or rehabilitation in time, in the correct manner. And it isn't finished there. Once the disaster is over, then the problem starts for the affected people, because many of them would have lost their livelihood. Many of them would have lost their habitat. What happens during a coastal cyclone? The complete fishing villages get wiped out. So again, the media, by drawing attention to their plight and what the government is doing and what more needs to be done, by connecting to the community, taking them on board, taking their opinion polls, taking their suggestions and putting that in a very structured way through debates or through the articles or through various media to the government or the givers, I will say, is what media is required to do, in addition to all other jobs that they're doing. So disaster requires responsibility and accountability. Disaster reporting requires a commitment towards the welfare of the people. And in that bargain, they have to learn the nuances of disaster management so that they can look for the right things, ask the right people, ask the right questions, and give suggestions to the right people. And the effort is not wasted. I'm very keen to hear all the panelists who are here because they're all very senior and renowned people in their own field. But initially, I was just given 3 minutes to talk to, so I have given some points, but I'm open to any questions if there are any. Thank you so much, Omkareshwar.
Thank you so much, General Bindal. And I would like to welcome Professor K.G. Suresh, Vice Chancellor of Makhanlal Chaturvedi Patrakarita Sansthan, and also Mr. Deepak Parvatiyar, who is a senior journalist who is also there. So I think your points are very, very valid, and it requires immediate answer by some of our senior journalists. Maybe Himanshu would like to respond to that, the points which you raised, that there are some problems, there are some issues. So before requesting Professor Suresh to say something, I would like Mr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra to intervene and say something about your point of view, that what is the basic problem in the media reporting today, why the ministry has to issue such warnings, and is there really non-seriousness or non-responsible kind of things which is happening? Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a privilege, of course, Omkareshwar sir, to take part in this very important deliberation. Actually, there are very serious structural issues that have emerged, because we do see now reporters being asked to cover more and more disaster incidents. And of course, we know that the frequency of disaster incidents is gradually increasing because of the climate change and the abnormal changes in global weather. And that in turn has shifted the focus on the primary theme of the deliberation that we are having today. That is the roles and responsibilities of media. I wish to focus on the capacity building aspect. I mean, there are lots of issues Bindal sir has actually raised. I think the most important thing to make India a very effective disaster watchdog, if I may use that phrase, if we want media to become more effective as a disaster watchdog, then we'll need to work on actually three critical issues. One, of course, is the pre-disaster phase. Now, the problem with Indian media largely is that the primary focus has been more on a disaster incident. If a flood comes, then if a tsunami comes, or if a cyclone comes, we do see a lot of coverage as long as the cyclone makes a landfall. But what happens before a tsunami or a cyclone has come, and what happens after the cyclone has devastated a coastal district or area or a region, is something which is not given that much primacy. So I think we need to work very seriously on capacity building, in the sense that disaster is a very complex subject. It is, of course, for me personally, as someone who covered the Jammu Kashmir floods, the unprecedented floods in Kashmir, in fact, worst in 102 years at that time, 2014. I can tell you that we were not prepared. I just went there because the NDRF DG sir was kind enough to facilitate my travel to the flood-ravaged Kashmir. And when I reached there, I had no planning whatsoever. And that was a great critical learning process for me. And I've been always been pushing for the fact that media needs more training. We need to work more on capacity building. And there are three distinct phases that every disaster has: the pre-disaster phase, the disaster phase, and the post-disaster phase. And we need to train journalists for all these different phases of disaster. That of course, I'll briefly discuss in detail. But there are also ethical issues in disaster reporting. You can't take a camera and go into a disaster zone and start broadcasting from there, because that disaster zone is a very disturbed psychological zone also for the disaster victims. I remember in Kashmir, I met people who had seen their own family members get washed away in floods just a couple of hours before I had met them. And the psychological trauma, the pain, the sense of loss is very acute. It's a circle of uncertainty in which you have to work. So I think there are ethical issues in terms of how we interview the disaster victims, the sympathy, the empathy with which we have to approach this entire subject. And of course, the COVID-19 and pandemic reporting that we have seen. I was just looking at the data a couple of minutes earlier. The latest figure shows that around 625 journalists died during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we do know that reporters have been out in the field. I have been out in the field from 25th March 2020, the first day of the nationwide lockdown. And I remember from that day till today, God has been kind enough that I survived the pandemic, but I have seen how badly reporters were affected, camera persons were affected, newsrooms were affected. In fact, at one time, in a news channel, 78 people had COVID-19. And so journalists have paid a very heavy price. And I think none of us were trained how to report on a pandemic. Now, there were a few protocols we could evolve on our own safety protocols, like we will never go inside a hospital, we'll never go inside a health center, we will not disclose the identity of the person who has COVID. And that was the protocol we followed in the initial days when there was a nationwide lockdown. But we have seen that this has been a very, very challenging time for journalists. And remember, we have been hit by several cyclones in last 2 years, starting with May 2020, when I remember I interviewed the NDRF DG at that time, and he said that we are now twin challenge before us. We not only have to protect people from cyclone, but we also have to ensure that we keep only 50% people in the cyclone shelters we have built, because we have to follow social distancing norms. Of course, the highways and roads were badly damaged, and that affected the supply of oxygen from parts of Gujarat to Maharashtra. We know in West Bengal that several districts, worst of COVID-affected districts, faced the wrath of the cyclone. Reporters were on the ground. So you have to protect yourself from the debilitating impact of a cyclone, and also ensure that you're safe, because there is a COVID pandemic all around you. So this has been extremely challenging time for reporters. And I compliment Omkareshwar sir to you for raising this issue and having this very important deliberation at a time when we are facing, as journalists, as field reporters, one of the most tough and complex time as a professional in our professional career. And we need to have a COVID risk assessment plan also. We also need to include to ensure that we do inclusive reporting, in the sense that you don't tarnish the image of a particular community. That has happened, unfortunately, during the first wave of COVID-19. We do know that courts had to intervene in this case. And of course, and also an idea that I wish to propose is as SOP, in fact, for reporting on climate disasters. The points that Bindal sir raised actually are very complex questions. And as an official who was present during the floods, of course, it's a great learning experience for us. And also I think I request him also to share what he envisages is the role and responsibilities that reporters must follow in the field during a climate disaster.
Yeah, thank you, Himanshu. We will come again to you and in the second round. But you also agree that media requires some kind of SOP, and there is a requirement of some trainings also, some education also. And now I would like to request Professor KG Suresh, who is here. He is the Vice Chancellor of India's biggest Mathanlal Chaturvedi Patrakarita Vishwavidyalaya. He was also the DG of IIMC, and he was also the consulting editor of Doordarshan. Has long experience. He has worked with PTI and all, and he understands. And he was instrumental in setting up the disaster-related, faculty and courses in Delhi University, JNU, and other areas. So I would like to request Professor KG Suresh now to please present his views in light of whatever Major General Bindal has said. He has raised a very valid question, and Mr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra has also talked about creating some SOP for the media for disaster coverage. Professor KG Suresh.
Thank you, Omkareshwar. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you were very, very much audible.
I missed out the initial part, but the later part of General Bindal and dear Himanshu Shekhar, I was able to listen to. I'm sorry for joining it pretty late. This was a very tight day, but if Omkareshwar gives a direction, then there is no option. You have to join. We have been friends for three decades, and so I cannot refuse him. So my apologies. Now, this is a subject. The second attraction, obviously, is the subject has been very dear to my heart. I have covered the earthquake in Gujarat as a journalist, the cyclones in Gujarat, and so many incidents. I've been a resource person of the NIDM, and I've worked closely with General Vij, NC Vij, when he took charge of the NDMA, and then I have also had the opportunity to train media persons at the Prasar Bharati Academy on disaster management, and I had the opportunity to set up the media faculty at the Special Center for Disaster Research at JNU. Now, and I feel that this is an important subject on which you have chosen today's discussions. A lot of what I wanted to say have already been shared by General Bindal and Himanshu, who has been a practitioner for a pretty long time. I just want to add on to, if I may, or complement rather what they have said. You see, Omkareshwar, the thing is that we in India have always believed in general reporting. We have never, we have put out all our reporters, our correspondents into different fields without proper training in their fields. We have always pushed them into different scenarios. I remember the Royal Palace massacre in Nepal, and I mean, the way we were sent out, I was also there for 6 months. People did not understand, the reporters who were sent out there did not understand the difference between Nepal and Bhopal. And they were reporting as if they were reporting from Bhopal, but we failed to recognize that that's a foreign country. And the same thing happened when, if you remember, the earthquake took place in Nepal, in Kathmandu. You had Indian media there, and so much so that within a week or so, there was a movement, go back Indian media, for the simple reason that our people were just not trained to report, how to report in a foreign country, how to report from a domestic scenario. What is the kind of, now we used to have a war correspondence course, if you remember, at NDA.
Yes.
And I still don't know that why we are, conflict reporting. These are all specialized areas. You cannot have somebody reporting politics, covering war from the next day. It cannot be, but maybe because of cost cutting, maybe because of a lack of culture in specialization, maybe because of a lack of research in our media institutions. We don't do research, These days we do a little bit of Google search, but we don't do research. We don't have research units in our media units. We don't do backgrounders. These are very important. Now, what is happening is that suddenly a crime reporter is pushed into a disaster scenario where he will look at it only from a crime point of view. His perspectives are very clear. Whereas it requires a different kind of treatment altogether. When I was at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, we, in collaboration with the Oxford University and Thomson Reuters Foundation, we started a critical appraisal skills program in public health communication. Now, come to think of it, public health is such an important issue which needs specialization in reporting, but we don't have specialization. People just go into health reporting and report, and the impact of that. It has a direct, unlike a political reporting, health reporting has a direct impact on the life of the individual. You would be surprised to know that when I conducted workshops for working journalists in Patna, in Lucknow, they were not aware of basic laws pertaining to health communication. They were not aware. Now, that means that, first of all, the most important part is that we need to nurture. There are good, hands like this is the question. institutions which understand the importance of having a person. But even then, Himanshu is essentially not, he has done it out of interest, and therefore he has been assigned. There has been no, he is not exclusively related to climate change, only disaster, which would have been the ideal thing. Because he's passionate about it, so Himanshu gets to do that. How and when will we have, I mean, in a leading Western paper or a media house, you won't have an environmental, journalist who will be covering automobiles. It doesn't happen like that, Now we expect multitasking, It doesn't happen like that. This is an era of super specialization where you need experts. You need people who are, well versed with the grammar of covering disasters. Not everybody can. So you need to have an army of such people. You cannot be dependent on one individual. At least there should be a couple of specialists. And of course, you should have 2-3 people who, in the event of the senior not being there, is able to, because a disaster can happen anytime. The senior may be on leave, but you need to send somebody. That's very important. That's the first thing. Second, I believe that media, and this I have been repeatedly saying, and thankfully now, whether it is the armed forces or the civilian governments, they are now keeping this in, factoring this in. Media is an integral, inalienable part of disaster response. You cannot have a disaster management team minus media, because a lot of you have today, you are living in the era of digital media. You are living in the era of smartphones. There is a menace called infodemic. There is an overdose of information. There is misinformation. There is disinformation. There is propaganda. There is fake content, and there is fake narrative.
Which is more serious.
It's no more dealing with 1 or 2 newspapers or 1 or 2 channels. You are dealing in one go with thousands of media platforms. Now that calls for somebody competent in every disaster response team, how to handle. This is very important. So this, I think that slowly, but gradually you see governments, state government, central government, NIDM, NDMA, they are all realize the importance of media, how to communicate in a disaster situation. That is the most important thing. Media has to be trained. I'll just give you one example, because I know there are other experts waiting. So this may be my initial remarks, but I was, editor of Doordarshan channel, when suddenly there was an earthquake which was felt in our headquarters. It was in Delhi. This was around the same time when the Kathmandu thing happened, maybe the after effects or whatever you call it. Suddenly all of us came out. What we did was that I personally took charge of the mic, and the message that I gave, because it was going live, I said that don't panic, don't evacuate together, get into lifts and escalators in one go, don't use them, use the stairs, keep yourself safe under a bed or a table so that things don't fall on you. Don't stand under a tree or an electric pole. Now, immediately, because of my training, I was able to immediately disseminate that on the channel within seconds of the earthquake happening. Now, this has to be you don't get into a panic, You have to very calmly respond to a situation. Now, every anchor, why only reporters? Every anchor in a channel, you must have seen viral videos of earthquake happening and the anchor himself or herself, and there was this channel somewhere in Pakistan, something had happened and you saw the anchor running out of the room. There was something happening in some other country. These all have gone viral. Now, even the anchors need to be sensitized that when something happens, how do you respond? What is the kind of, if you remember, when these flash floods occurred in Uttarakhand, the last time, the initial reports were so panicky. I mean, we felt that, the entire, everything has come down. I'm not talking about the Badrinath floods or the Kedarnath floods. I'm talking about the recent ones which hit some small dams also. But the way it was reported initially, one felt that, there is going to be huge. They showed the visuals of the water gushing out with mud and everything. They were repeatedly being shown. What is the whole idea of the report? The report is to ensure that you don't create panic. That has to be. Now, these glimpses were lifted and they were being shown ad nauseum on different YouTube channels. Now, this creates panic that where is it happening? It must have happened in one end. At the end of the day, yes, any loss of life is a tragedy. But in that particular event, the flash floods occurred, not much was, I think it was the Banganga and all that project was there. So some upstream dams were hit, the smaller ones, but the kind of disaster that was predicted did not happen. But it was meant as if, the entire Hardwar is going to drown. Some of the reportage was to sensationalize, kind of. This tendency has a lot of immense damage potential. Now, here is the importance of training, because it can lead to, heart attacks among senior citizens. It can lead to panic attacks. And of course, psychologically, as Himanshu said, it can impact you, because the trauma part has never been taken into account. We have been looking at damages. We have been looking at loss of life and damage to property. But the trauma part is very important, because that cannot be measured. How many people have been impacted by the trauma of seeing, your dear ones being, if you remember those tsunami pictures, that you have the husband and the wife is being, dragged away by the waters, and, you are just unable to do anything. These are pictures, which we are not able to forget. Imagine what would have happened to those family members who were seeing it right in front of their eyes. It was something. Now, how to deal with this situation? What kind of, I remember the Upar fire tragedy, if you remember, Omkareshwar, at that time, the questions were hugely criticized, that आपको कैसा लग रहा है, आपको कैसा महसूस हो रहा है, now
the usual question the television media asks.
Yes,
when somebody is in distress, you are asking how you are feeling.
Imagine this question was asked to somebody who lost her 2 children in the fire. Somebody was being asked that आपको कैसे महसूस हो रहा है. Now, this is something we need to sensitize our people, because sometimes at the spur of the moment, it is not deliberate. I am not saying those journalists are inhuman. They are under a lot of pressure. They are under a lot of pressure against the breaking news syndrome that has happened. They need to, give some exclusive to their, to their bosses back in the office. So they have their limitations. But within those limitations, can I be a little more sensitive? Can I convey very strong messages without being sensational? Now, these are some of the challenges which we need to factor in. And what is required is, I am all for training, which I believe, and I am ready to, I can only say I am, as head of Asia's first and India's largest university with over 1 lakh students, 4 campuses, 1,600 study centers. I can only say that, Omkareshwar, any such initiative, we would be happy to be part of, to take this forward. But I believe that this is the need of the hour, that we need to train our journalists particularly. And this is particularly because we have been focusing a lot only, whether it is conflict reporting, whether it is other kind of reporting, film appreciation, we have been focusing only on urban journalists. But believe me, most of the disasters happen in the rural areas. Urban disasters are also there. I mean, I talked about the Upahar fire tragedy, and these things are there. But a lot of these tragedies happen in the rural areas, where you have stringers, where you have, part-time correspondents who are working. Yeah. They are unskilled, literally. We need to skill them. We need to train them. We need to sensitize them. Third, we have most of our material today, training material, is in English. Whereas the Indian media today is predominantly Indian language media. We need to understand this. We need to, whether it is Hindi, Tamil, Malayalam, Punjabi, Gujarati, Marathi, Bangla, whatever it is,
regional languages.
Have a lot of content, training modules in the Indian languages. That's very important, because today majority of the media and the prosumers on digital media are communicating in Indian languages. We need to have more content in that. So I'll rest my case for the time being, and we will take it up further.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Suresh, and thanks for your observation and also your views. And I'll again come back to you for asking your suggestion on what kind of SOP is needed, and what is your suggestions to create any mechanism that can develop an effective media or disaster management agencies, so that there could be a partnership between them and there could be a better sense of reporting amongst the media person. I will come back to you again. Now I would like to request Ms. Sweta Ranjan, who has been a hardcore journalist, and she is the bureau chief of this Governance Now magazine, and she has been doing ground reporting since quite long for various television channels. So I would like to ask her views, her own experiences, and what are her own suggestions, and also from the point of view of a female, because many times this gender issue is neglected while talking about, while making any policy in regard to disaster management or disaster management reporting. So your views, Sweta Ranjan.
Hello everyone, thanks for having me here, and special thanks to Omkareshwarji and Spare India. Eminent guests present on the panel have highlighted very relevant points, and I would be close to that only because I believe most of us have been in the field of journalism, and experiences end up to be almost same, but since you asked from a female point of view, of course that will differ, which I'll come to. But firstly, I would like to agree myself with whatever suggestions or ideas have been put by Bindal sir or Himanshu ji, or in fact, Omkareshwar sir, aapne jo kaha, Suresh sir. Being in the journalism industry for close to 2 decades, one thing I have understood.
Shweta, you can feel free to use any language. We all understand Hindi and English both. So if, whatever language you want to use, you can use.
That's okay, sir. Like a natural disaster or any disaster, make a sudden visit. Journalists too in the industry have been basically taught to go on any assignment suddenly. All of a sudden, it is announced. Of course, it cannot be planned, but like we talk about the flood in Kashmir. That was unprecedented. But there are some areas where floods are very much expected. Almost every year we witness, like in Bihar, for example, where I went, I think if I can recall it correctly, in 2017. And what I witnessed was, the authorities who were delegated to hand over the relief material, women, from the balconies with the children, they are crying for help. They don't have milk for children. Do teen din se they are hungry. So I went, me and my husband, we went into the flood, deep into the flood. And wo pani drain water. In fact, we developed some kind of this thing also, a skin infection also later we realized. Because we did not know what to do when you go into that water, what needs to be done, what precautions need to be taken. So one thing is clear, the journalists are not trained, be it me also. Like we are trained when we go on the location. We are just quickly assigned the assignments. We go on the location, we do the experiments, we then are taught or we experiment with things and then we learn and groom ourselves. So if we think, have we ever been trained, okay, this beat is yours, like all journalists are assigned one beat. I was mostly doing political beat. But if I go to cover, suddenly if I'm assigned and sent for an assignment like this, I'm not prepared. I do not know. So be it from the scratch or the beginning of the journey as a journalist, when I was doing my internship or when I groomed myself and worked in plenty of channels, no platform ever had anything like a research unit or a unit where journalists, as per their beats which are assigned, they are explained or taught. It is just like chhod diya. छोड़ दो जर्नलिस्ट को, अपने आप वो सीखता रहेगा. वो सही है कि we all learn with time. अब आपको स्विमिंग पूल में धक्का दे दिया जाए तो आप तैरना सीख जाओगे, सो आप सीख जाते हो. But if we want to be really professional and want to do good coverage on disaster, you cannot be sending journalists who have never covered it or who have no idea about that particular zone, who do not know about how to do coverage on disaster reporting. So this particular mechanism is missing from most of the channels, satellite channels, or even I can say print media, because these disasters are not like a planned press conferences. They come suddenly. So journalists also do not need to wait for the time when the disaster will hit, okay, and then we'll do the coverage. And in the beginning, in the opening sentence, you mentioned about Northeast Delhi, Jahangirpuri, where protests happened. We have been talking from the perspective of natural disaster, but I consider these things also as disasters. Disaster where, in two communities, some clash happens, something happens, goes wrong, like we have been witnessing a lot lately. Are the journalists trained to use languages which can mitigate the complexities? No, because there's a kind of competition. कौन कितना गंदा शब्द बोल सकता है, कौन कैसे दौड़ दौड़ के रिपोर्टिंग कर सकता है, कौन if you can recall, in 2013 we saw during Uttarakhand flood a TV journalist who reported on those deadly floods in the north of the country, while the reporter perched on the survivor's shoulder. Uske shoulder pe बैठ के he was reporting, and later on, he gave the story that because he was kind of paying respect to the reporter, he had to sit on the shoulder. These are weird things. Can you ever ride on someone's back for a story, on a survivor's back? What message are we sending? Where has the sensitive, sensible journalism gone? This is a matter of concern. With time, if we see there is a decline, and decline is kind of, it is dangerous. Because I will come to Northeast Delhi wala part also, Jahangirpuri. Earlier when journalists reported, they never mentioned that एक पारसी को मार दिया, एक ईसाई को मार दिया, एक मुसलमान को मार दिया, हिंदुओं ने दंगा कर दिया. नाउ इफ वी सी, पहले ये होता था कि दो समुदायों के बीच में झगड़ा हो गया एंड यू नो सम पीपल लॉस्ट देयर लाइव्स. बट अब क्या है कि आपका जो हेडलाइन होता है वो हिंदू, मुसलमान, ईसाई, सिख ऐसे होता है. So this can be really dangerous. Then I'll come to the point as a women journalist. If I can recall plenty of experiences, may not be disaster, but plenty of experiences where I really had tough time. And this is none of the fault of the TV channels or the fault of not being trained or unskilled. It is what sort of infrastructure do we have in the country? Like many a times I have felt during my shoots on those areas where there is no washroom available, no toilet available, where to go? What kind of arrangements are made for women? Like I was sent from one of the reputed channels to Rajasthan to cover Jat Andolan. And उसमें I was live and I was being pushed go deep into the bheed and Sachin Pilot को की bite लेनी है this सबसे पहले लेनी है bite, वो breaking news का जो होता है. And I don't know, suddenly I found myself falling on the ground and dupatta gone somewhere and chappals gone somewhere. And those people are almost running over me. The mob, it was like a mob. So what do we do when such a thing happened? We have not been taught. Now I know, okay, this situation happens. So I learn it after experience. Similarly, for disaster reporting, we are taught from the experience. This is not a vicarious experience. These are self-learned things. When like Nepal ka jaise mentioned kiya. So why couldn't be a reporter sent to Nepal who had a great experience or expertise on Nepal? Similarly, for disaster, we wait for the time if the cyclone comes, if the flood comes, that time we are doing all kind of coverages, or even post this disaster. But during the time when there is non-disaster time, what are we doing? Do we have any linkages between the authorities or rural areas where we have the hard-working stringers or reporters on the ground level? Are they being trained? So this problem occurs mainly because of the unskilled approach, unskilled bheed of the journalists. Even if they do training, even if they do a degree in journalism or they do a sort of diploma in journalism, but if they are not trained, they are beat-wise, be it political or crime. Like if we see, I was talking to one of the policemen.
Basically, you want to say that training is required for the media people.
Of course,
when they go for disaster.
Yes.
So let me request Mr. K.A. Shaji. He is from Kerala and he has been writing for various national and international dailies, weeklies and all. And he has covered extensively the disaster related events. So I would like to ask you, Mr. Shaji, what has been your experience and what is your suggestions? How we can, do you think that we require to create any SOP? Do we require to be trained for the disaster coverage, and what kind of training and what kind of SOP should be there? Your views, Mr. Shaji. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry, actually, I'm very much happy to be here and to be part of this discussion. And I feel it is a very good learning experience. People from different walks of life, experts, vice chancellors, people who are directly engaging in disaster management. And we are all talking about how the media people should behave, or what the society or the community is expecting from the media person who is on the field, who is reporting disaster. And while going through or listening to all this discussion so far, I was going behind in time in my memory. And as a cub reporter, I started disaster reporting by chance, like most other people, most other journalists here. Because one evening, there was a landslide happening about 200 kilometers away from my news bureau. My bureau chief told me, as you have no other assignment, you just go there. That time, 22 years ago, I was a cub reporter. I knew very little about reporting an event, reporting about a disaster. And from that day, I started learning more about reporting reporting responsibly about disasters. And now it is almost 22 years. And in between several of such disasters, I have reported from across South India, from Karnataka, from Kerala, from Tamil Nadu. And in the 2, 3, 4 years, exactly since 2018, even I had an opportunity to work with Fear India on a project of it in Kerala, following the 2018 floods, to teach the media community how to report responsibly during such occasions. So far, what I learned is from all these orientations we have conducted, all the attempts we have tried to infuse among the journalists, what I known and what I learned so far is the problem is lying with the whole purpose from the beginning. Because in India, whatever the tragedies are occurring, whatever such issues are occurring, whatever the climate issues occurring, disasters are occurring, we are treating them only as incidents. We are not treating them as part of a process. If in Western Ghat area, one flood happens or a landslide happens, or a larger incident happening in the Kashmir or in the Uttaranchal, and our people, we are reporting these as single incidents. We are not studying properly the reasons. We are not interconnecting things. We are not bringing about the experience from other sides. And people simply going there and just giving a picture of the casualties, the involved issue, the tragedy, then we are purposefully or comfortably forgetting about it. 2 years ago, there was a major disaster happened in Kerala, in Idukki district of Kerala, a place called Pettimudi. The poor estate workers, tea workers, they were killed in a major landslide. The same day, an air crash happened in Calicut in North Kerala, and it also killed several people. But its impact was lesser while comparing with the disaster happened in Pettimudi. But the very next day, across India, the newspapers given priority only to the air crash in Calicut. And they simply ignored these poor people. And only it took about 3-4 days to journalists to go there and report whatever actually happened. So the priority matters, the preferences matters, the people matters. If people with power, if people with clout on the governments, or the people having the affordability, these people are getting priority in our disaster reporting. Even in Chennai, when Chennai was flooded 2-3 years ago, even the national media carried very good report because most of the affected people are the richest people of Chennai because the floods are a kind of equalizer because it is not discriminating between the poor and the rich. And same is happening in the case of Mumbai. Because Mumbai floods are getting prominent space in newspapers. At the same time, more dangerous or more, floods with more magnitude in Assam is not getting enough space in the media. Because the Mumbai people matters, Chennai people matters, but Kashmir people or Northeast people or Assam people, they are not matters. It is happening everywhere. So the main thing is, this is kind of disaster reporting. Disaster reporting must not be an incident specific. It must have to unravel the issues contributing to it. Across India, we now agree climate change is a main villain, and every year disasters are happening. But there are many human contributions or human factors which are aggravating disasters. So a journalist, the duty of a journalist is studying things. Their duty and responsibility is not ending by just visiting a place and giving a report of the casualty. They have to talk to experts. They have to get latest data. They have to get objective studies and analysis. And based on them, they have to give a clear picture. If something is happening in Kerala, we have to compare it with what is happening in Kashmir or Uttaranchal. Then only we can say this happened last year in the Himalayan area. This year it is now happening in the coastal area of Kerala. These are the similarities. These are the differences. So such a comparative study. And also the disaster reporters have two duties, I think. One is giving the ground reality to the attention of the opinion makers, policy makers, scientists, experts, governments, ministers, all. That is one side. And another one is bringing the opinion of the experts or the people who know about things or the people who can advise these people on how to survive future repetition of such events. So such information the journalists have to bring to the affected communities. So in a two-way process, they have to facilitate a kind of climate literacy, a kind of disaster literacy. So in this case, as the previous speaker said, it is most essential is getting much more training to these people, because the journalists generally they are lacking training in any particular field, and most of the journalists are jacks of all trades. And the universities like our universities have a duty. Journalist institutes have a duty, and also press clubs and journalist organizations and the information broadcasting ministry, they all have to collectively take the responsibility to teach journalists how to report responsibly about disasters, also climate change, and also interconnect things, because many things are interrelated. I told you in 2018 the disasters happened in Kerala, some parts of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, but looking general, the incidents happened in the Western Ghats area. So it is not a Kerala tragedy, it is not a Karnataka tragedy, it is not a Tamil Nadu tragedy, but something happened in a common area, a crucial part of the Western Ghats. So a comprehensive kind of approach, a scientific kind of approach, an objective kind of approach only can bring about the truth, and it will only force the experts to find out the solution. So the journalist's duty, journalists are first of all watchdogs of the democracy. Then they must have to have enough knowledge. Knowledge is the weapon of a journalist. If some journalists are going to the ground and reporting about the calamity, the extent of calamity, they must have to aware whether it is in the case of Western Ghats or the coastal region. In the coastal region, everywhere, each and every year, many kinds of tragedies are occurring. In the case of Arabian Sea area, the heat level is increasing, and that is why earlier 10 years ago there was no cyclone in the Arabian Sea. In the last 2-3 years since the Oki, we have seen many such events, many extreme weather events are happening. So climate change is a reality, and every year we have to anticipate newer incidents of a climate disaster. So we have to equip our journalists with more tools, and people who are directly engaging in disaster management, disaster rescue operations, they have a lot of knowledge, and they can train these journalists in this way, and sharing of the information between the experts and journalists will yield much more result. That is what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Shazi, for your valuable views. And I would like to request Mr. Deepak Parwatiya to briefly share his views. He has been also participating in our roundtable conferences, which happened in several cities. In the last 2 months, I will say that we organized similar kind of roundtables in Guwahati, in Mumbai, in Bangalore, and in Delhi also. We had physically organized in Delhi. And this is, I think, the fourth or fifth round of discussion which we are having today online. Mr. Deepak, what is your views on the topic which is going on, which is being discussed today, and in the light of the recent, warnings of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, which says that no unauthenticated views will be tolerated, and government has the powers to, take action against the such television channels or maybe some media houses. And also, how do you see the role of media today in the coverage of disasters, not only Ukraine or maybe Delhi riots, some natural disasters also. Briefly, your views, Mr. Deepak Parvatia. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible now.
Thank you, Ankar Ashwarji, for giving this platform. As you said, that this is, if I'm not mistaken, my third time this is that I am participating in your series. And this series by itself is a very good exercise, and I must congratulate you for that, for sensitizing journalists and creating an awareness among media persons on the issue of disaster reporting. And you have raised some questions. And since this is my third, and without being repetitive of what I had been saying in the earlier two programs, first thing, what I would like to say that I would like to endorse, I want to be very brief. I would like to endorse my dear friend Professor KG Suresh on whatever he has said. He has talked about media education. He is a vice chancellor, fine. But what type of education are we supposed to provide to the budding journalists or even the persons who are already working journalists? Because they also require some sort of training. And when the government is stepping in, as you said, of course, there are some gray areas. That's why we are giving scope to government to step in, which should not otherwise have happened. And this is not a very healthy sign for the media organization if the government is stepping in and is saying something about and imposing their rules and all these things. I don't think it is very, but at the same time, we must acknowledge that our media, the way they have reported and the way they have been reporting, what is happening is actually that we should be trained to empathize with the people rather than just rushing for breaking news. In this age of breaking news, one of the earlier speakers talked about breaking news. Can we come out of this breaking news syndrome? Because disasters, when we talk of disasters, this is not just that. It is not just about breaking news, who is winning the race. It is about the humankind. The humankind is suffering. So media has to be very responsible here. And how can it be responsible unless it empathizes with the people who are the sufferers? Like a previous speaker said that he was trapped during lockdown at some place. I was also. And for 55 days, I was away somewhere. And obviously, I stopped watching television channels because they were sensationalizing things. So media has to be educated on this sensationalism. Does it really always help? And who will train them about this thing? If we are talking of a curriculum, if we are talking of a course, we cannot ignore this sensationalism part. So in universities, you have to train people about how to avoid sensationalism and be accurate and still be effective.
Yeah.
So this is what I would like to say. I don't want to say much about it, and because there are many, and you all have spoken so well about other things. So I think this is enough from my side.
One of the important participants in this webinar is Mr. Rajendram Logendra. He is a Deputy Registrar of the University of Sri Lanka, and he has joined from Colombo, and he has sent a small note, his observation. And he has said that in social media news reporting, I have noticed that many media reporters give false or misrepresented or confusing captions to their news stories in order to catch the attention of the media consumers. However, once you click the link and watch news clips, which often completely different, is that ethical? I mean, is that a responsible way of reporting? That is what Mr. Logendram Rajendra has asked. And I would like to ask to Major General Mk Bengal to respond to his questions and also his views about how to create a better situation and how to create a SOP for the media. and especially also maybe could be a guideline or could be a guidebook for the media to help them. Major General Bindal.
Dr. Omkareshwar, all the speakers have stressed on one point time and again, that is capacity building of the journalist, rather than them learning on the job or as and when they are pushed into a particular situation. Second issue everyone has spoken about is empathizing with the affected people and get out of the breaking news of the sensationalism syndrome. So what the questions are there from the Sri Lanka, Mr. Rajendran, are pertaining to this breaking news and sensationalism syndrome, where to get that media bite, to get that breaking news slot in the media channel, or people resort to misreporting or disreporting. Or out of context reporting. Many a times I'll say it is out of context reporting by not relating the things to ground realities in the correct way. Now, this is something which both the media houses have to look into, because any such misreporting which is not related to ground reporting should be considered as an offense. What type of offense, I don't know, but now Ministry of INB has already taken out that they will be dealt with strictly, which also was brought out by many speakers. I think the time has come that anyone who does wrong reporting or out of context reporting, you understand what I'm trying to say in out of context reporting, where we pick out one particular bite of the out of the whole and blow it up and put it in give it a different narrative altogether. I think they need to be questioned, and whatever action needs to be taken by the media houses should be done. Public is always at a liberty to change the channel, but by the time they understand that this is a false propaganda, already the damage has been done, because not everyone is intelligent enough to understand in such a faster frame. Till such time some of the news channel brings out a contradictory not a collaborative news, and this particular, the previous news is discredited. So I think this is a global phenomena which is happening. Even if you see Ukraine war, how much of false reporting is being done by the Ukrainian news agency and the Western media to bring to light Russia's failures. But in that whole gambit, we have not even heard even a single human rights violation news. So there is a responsible war being fought with responsibility. Whether the war is correct or not is a totally different matter. I'm not saying it is a war for the good of the country or planet or something like that. No, there is a war being fought, but it is being fought under different, with different criteria in mind. Because someone in this program earlier also said disaster reporting and conflict reporting need to be given a higher weightage during the training period. Very right. So accountability, holding people accountable for false information is very, very important. And a mechanism should be there within each media house. And of course, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting should have a portal where any citizen who finds someone reporting wrong can put that clip onto the net so that it is brought to the notice of appropriate authorities, so that we know we cannot stop it, but we can at least reduce the, I'd say, instances that occur. Because, and also while training the people, motivating them, telling them, which is absent as of now, because no speaker has spoken about any structured training being carried out on any issue, and like what Dr. Shweta also spoke about, that they're just left to themselves to learn. So it's more of on-the-job training. I think there should be proper training programs which should be conducted, and in that ethical reporting should become a very big part of the whole thing. And related to disasters, the issue about SOP is very, very important. There have been a number of publications related to how the media should be responding in disaster situation, but there has been no document per se which is talking about how the training of a journalist or a reporter is supposed to be carried out in his formative stages, or people who are already senior journalists, as to how they should respond to a disaster, how they should prepare for a disaster assignment, and what language they have to use. That example which was given of a lady who lost two sons in a fire and being asked by a journalist, how do you feel? That shows that the person was not being taught. He just templated some question of some other issue onto disaster related issue where it was not required. So that difference is to be taught, where to empathize, where to sympathize, and where to go for objective reporting. So I think the SOP and a guidebook, a resource book for the media persons is very, very important. And I'll be very happy to collaborate on this, as also to conduct training on media and disaster management if you desire so anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you, General Bindal. But my point of view is little different. What happened? Everything was fine when the print media was there. It all started only maybe the evening journalism. Eveningers had been doing some sensational, reporting and headlines, which we had been seeing that अमिताभ को चाकू लगा, अब कौन से अमिताभ बच्चन को लगा या अमिताभ किसी गली वाले को लगा, तो वो इवनिंगर्स में आता था उस तरह का. ये टेलीविजन में उस तरह का ये जो आया है, ये भी एक सेक्शन ऑफ और कल हुआ इस टाइप की रिपोर्टिंग जो हो रही है मीडिया irresponsible हो गई है, which is not true. Only a section of media is doing such things, and the blame is coming on the entire media. There is internal structure, there is internal mechanism. रिपोर्ट को फाइनल प्रिंट होने एडिटर और फाइनली एडिटर तक जाके वो प्रिंट होता है, तो वहां एक स्ट्रक्चर बना हुआ है. टेलीविजन की प्रॉब्लम ये है कि यू हैव गिवन अ माइक टू ए जूनियर रिपोर्टर एंड ही हैज बीन सडनली सेंट टू कवर एनीथिंग डिजास्टर और समथिंग, एंड यू डोंट नो व्हाट ही विल बी सेइंग फ्रॉम द ग्राउंड, एंड ही इज डायरेक्टली ऑन एयर. So that's the basic problem where a training is required for the journalist. Print में अभी भी एक seriousness है, लेकिन television में. And again, we are in the age of social media now. Social media is not controlled by anybody, whether it's government or whether it's no entity is there to control. Even now the social media themselves are trying to control on based on some of the algorithm and some of the artificial intelligence. So Facebook has created their own desk to check on whether it's a true or false news. I have been, in fact, a Google trainer also on debunking the fake news. So the Google has come out in a very large scale program for training to the media persons, and I think they have trained almost thousands of journalists across country from various languages. And they have created a tool. Twitter has also created a desk. PIB has also created a desk for debunking fake news. Some of the television channels also, they have started some programs. You can see on some of the channel ki viral news ka sach kya hai वो देने लगे हैं. लेकिन that is one thing, to check the viral news which has already come, and if I am in the reporting, if I am in the field, I have to understand how I have to report and what I have to say, what language I have to use. So this is all require internal trainings also. And we are also in the age of this social media, which is being utilized by some of the political parties or some of the people who are having vested interest. They have the habit of cutting a particular bite of any particular leader and putting them on viral, कि देखो इसने ये कहा, अब उसने किस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में कहा या पूरी बात क्या कही है. Any political party, I'm not saying anyone. So maybe opposition, maybe ruling, maybe this party, maybe that party, but this is being done by some section of who has the vested political interest also, which is also creating a lot of confusion in the field. So I would like to request Mr. Himanshu Shekhar to say a few words on this, because he is from the hardcore television, and the major the discussion centers around the television reporting on such matters. Even the Ministry of Information Broadcasting has also said about the television how they are reporting. And thank you, Mr. Rajendram Logendra from Colombo. I think your question has been answered properly by General Bindal. If you want to come on a screen for a second, you can come and say thanks to General Bindal. Anyway, Mr. Himanshu, would you like to say, throw some light on this issue?
Yeah, sir. So essentially, when you talk about capacity building, and you also we have been deliberating on the different facets of the training that is needed for the media personnel. I think we need to have a differential policy framework for this, because different disaster requires a different kind of skill base, especially for journalists. And now, for example, if you have been asked to cover a cyclone, for instance, then you need to be trained as to how the cyclone affects a given zone where the maximum impact is expected, so the reporters don't expose themselves to the danger that, of course, exists in any disaster zone. Covering an earthquake, as Suresh was mentioning, of course, would require a different kind of a training, a different kind of protocol for media reporting. I can tell you, covering a flood, for instance, would be again a very completely different kind of experience. And there is also a threat of epidemic when a flood disaster happens, or even when the water remains stagnated for a long time, even in areas close to the sea, in the coastal areas. So there are issues, ethical issues, logistics related issues, issues of media training, and of course, how the ethicality of reporting largely, because remember, in some countries, for example, in the Haiti earthquake, while it has been globally studied that social media played a very, very critical role in disaster relief and rescue work, because large number of people who were stranded and had got buried under their buildings, wherever the internet was working, they could contact their family members, and special efforts could be made to actually protect them, bring them out alive. But we also know that there has been serious instances of misuse of social media as well, in the sense that if a media platform is misused, if wrong information is given during a disaster, then that can actually impact the entire flow of disaster relief and rescue work in a given disaster zone. It would mean loss of man hours. It would mean loss of lots of things on the ground. So I think, as Bindal sir was saying, that there's also a need for fixing accountability, that if a reporter or a media institution broadcasts or disseminates news which is not correct, then there has to be an accountability framework to deal with such instances. But I can also tell you, Omkareshwar sir, when I landed in Kashmir during floods, and Bindal sir, of course, was there, there were 3 SIM cards I was carrying and none of them was working. And for next 12 hours, we actually didn't know which was the right person in the Jammu Kashmir government or in the NDRF or in the Indian Army whom we can walk up to get critical information that we desperately needed. Now, all that we could do in first 12 hours was spot reporting, that you go into a colony which is flooded, talk to people who are affected, because I was told that the district administration had actually melted with the flood waters, because they were also equally affected as the local populace in Srinagar. And so the fact that the mobile and communication towers had collapsed in many parts of Srinagar Valley, it was very difficult for an outside reporter like me to actually even not only get primary information from official sources, but also to broadcast it live from ground zero, where I desperately wanted to do. And I think in the first 24 hours, I collected some 7-8 stories shot right on ground zero. And I had to actually fly back to my headquarters in Delhi to actually broadcast them, because our satellite systems were not working. We were unable to uplink the feed. So while from gathering news, primary news from spot, to contacting people, because the mobile phones were just not working to most of us, the SIM cards that I had, and to broadcasting it to the nation at the right time. Remember, it's very important. The last point that I want to make, Omkareshwar sir, the more space you give, the more rights you give to reporters in a disaster zone is directly correlational to how much information the nation will get, the right credible information the nation will get in the time of a crisis, a disaster crisis. So I think we need to work and train reporters differentially. Different disasters would require different training, different kind of protocol, different kind of logistical support. And state has to support media institutions so that they can do their work ethically, morally, and in the interest of the nation.
I absolutely agree with you, Mr. Himanshu. The media, since it plays a very, very important role that everybody understand and accepts also, but unfortunately, they are kept away from any disease, policy making part. So they should be at least taken into confidence that how there should be a collaboration with media for better flow of information, and that will help for the affected people who are affected with any kind of disasters. So at the end, I would like to request again Professor KG Suresh ji, if you are there. So say a few words that what kind of SOP is needed, what kind of collaboration we require, and what kind of training we as a whole media people are required. And your views, Professor KG Suresh, please.
Thank you, Omkareshwar. I have already mentioned that, training has to be part of the media curriculum in different universities that we have. This can be designed in collaboration with NIDM and other, like-minded institutions. Now, this is a course wherein I believe that it is.
Please put your mic on silence.
I think somebody's phone is on.
Yeah, I think. Yes, please go ahead.
Now, there are a few components on, the SOPs which are important. And of course, there has to be a consensus discussion on this. But a couple of points which I believe is very important is the most important, I believe, is to understand the natural disasters, what kind of natural disasters are there. What constitutes natural and what constitutes unnatural. This is something for which a clear understanding has to be there. Because people are not even aware how something like, for example, when we covered the Upahar fire tragedy, initially it was widely thought that people died in it is called Upahar fire tragedy. But nobody got killed due to the fire. It was the smoke. It was asphyxiation which killed the people, not the fire. Nobody got burnt. Nobody, so this is something which we need to understand. So we need to understand the different, aspects of disasters. Second is that you need to understand what are the do's and don'ts. This is very important. Like when you teach somebody going to cover a violent protest, that you should not be behind the people. You should be behind the police force, the security force. We are not supposed to be, when there is a stone pelting, we don't go behind the crowd and cover it. We cover it from the side of the security forces. We stand behind them and then we cover it. Whenever there is a lathi charge, whenever there is a, water cannon, you don't come in front as a journalist. So this is important. Whenever you cover something, where do you stand? How do you cover? This is something which is very important.
You will have to
Again,
hide
a
yourself
lot of,
first of all.
yeah,
You will have to hide yourself first of all.
absolutely. Your life has to be saved first. Only then, that is the basic rule,
Yeah, true.
If you yourself are at risk, then what kind of reporting are you doing? You have to protect yourself. That is the fundamental rule of any coverage.
True.
I have covered, terror incidents. I have covered, Afghanistan, but we know how to go about it, that if there is a landmine in front of you, how to escape that landmine, how not to get into that. What are the steps that you have to keep in mind? These are things that we need to, in disaster also, what are the things that you have to keep in mind when you are in an earthquake prone area? After the Gujarat earthquake, we could have shifted to any of those, hotels which somehow were still working. But we decided not to work out of any hotel. We decided to put our tent in the open. And we stayed in the open. And that ensured that even during the after effects, after that January 26, jolt, the earthquake, nothing happened, because we had protected ourselves, safeguarded ourselves. So you have to have that. You need to carry your water, food stuff, all these places. You don't get these things. You need to carry that. How to survive in a particular situation, this training has to be given to them. Then comes the reporting part of it. So first of all, safeguarding yourself, and then how to, your professional work, how to do that. This is something again that, now that is where the empathy part, which a lot of people, including my friend Deepak Parvati, are referred to. The empathy part has to be built in. What kind of questions are to be asked? What kind of photographs are to be taken and not taken? Do you intrude into the privacy of the individual? If there is somebody who has lost everything and is lying naked, do you cover that naked person? You don't. What are the pictures which are ethical to be showed? When I was covering the Gujarat cyclone, I saw dead bodies hanging on electrical wires. Now, that was so shocking to see dead bodies hanging on electrical wires. People just flew, and they hit that place and they were there. Now, how do you show that? When the Charki Dadri mid-air collision took place, I saw hands on one side, leg on one side, body on another side. Are you going to take these pics? Are you going to show the gory details? Now, this also have to be. Now, believe me, when I'm talking about reporting, I'm also talking about photography. I'm also talking about videography. We are not talking about only, the reporting part of it, the textual content. It includes the visual content also. This also has to be kept in mind. Then, who are the people to be spoken to? Who are the authorities to be spoken to? What is the kind of stories? Do you put out unverified stories? During this vaccination campaign, one of the stories which made to the headline in some local papers, but was not carried by any responsible national media, was that vaccination can lead to impotence. Now, suppose if it had got viral, imagine the seeds of distrust this vaccine would have sown in the minds of the people, that this could lead to, this could lead to impotence. People would not have gone for a vaccination. But responsible media houses, I got friends who are editors of leading newspapers. They said that we are not taking this. Let the rival publish it. We don't care. So we need to take a call. What is the kind of, because all kinds of rumors float. I remember during the 1984 riots, I was staying in South Delhi, and there were reports that the tank has been poisoned. Imagine the kind of rumors that go along. That the water tank has been poisoned. So water coming out of it is poisoned. People will not drink.
True, true.
So these are the kind of stories that float, the rumors, the rumor mills work overtime during disasters. All kinds of stories are put out. So I not only carry it, but if possible, I try to verify and do a fact check. Today, because of the social media, which all my friends on the panel mentioned, today it is our responsibility to do fact checking. Institutions like PIB and a lot of people are doing fact checking, but the floodgates have been opened. There is an infodemic. There is an overdose of information. That how many things can you... Yesterday again, somebody sent me a message saying that, you know, Jana Gana Mana has been selected as the best national anthem by UNESCO.
Always comes.
It keeps coming every 3 months, every 6 months.
Yeah.
I said that I respect my national anthem. I love my national anthem. But please, he was a well-educated person. I told him that, does it happen like that? That UNESCO will conduct a competition of best national anthem. Just use your common sense. I mean, will they derogate any other country, denigrate any other country by saying that this anthem is the best, the other anthems are, you know, second rate. This is the best. Just use your common sense, I said. He said that, yeah, you are right. Somebody shared it with me. So out of a sense of pride and patriotism, I said, patriotism is good. But please don't spread such things. You will look foolish. So now the whole idea is that all kinds of things which may appear very true and which actually appeal to your sentiments, they may come. So you have to do fact checking. That is something that is... Then how to get on to the... And here, because General Saab is also here, one issue that often people complain is that now that is where a sense of balance has to come. They say that only why some select channels are, you know, get access to helicopters, choppers, VVIP treatment they get. Some big channels get it, the others don't get it. So I think that it is my personal view.
That is not possible also to take all the media.
No, in most cases, it is through personal connect that it happens. I have seen many channels being taken, and that generally happens through the personal contacts of the... But that is not a good practice. Because once they do it, a particular channel is given importance, the other channels then will only look for an opportunity to find fault. That, okay, they have given preference, now we will teach them a lesson. So please make it a rule, and I appreciate in this regard that, you know, the policy of the Ministry of External Affairs. They don't take journalists anymore in foreign tours of the Prime Minister. Only the agencies are taken. If you know, I think that agencies, whether print or electronic, they can disseminate information to everybody in a jiffy. They should only take agencies, make it a hard and fast rule that no individual players will be taken, only agencies will be taken. I think that that will ensure that a treatment of equality is being meted out to everybody. That is an SOP that our armed forces, our NIDMs and other NDMAs, they will have to take into account. Otherwise, there is this feeling that we are being discriminated against. And how many people can you accommodate? You cannot.
True.
Last but not the least, because we are talking about SOPs. I also believe that there has to be a regular feedback mechanism, and somebody who is available 24/7 to give information to the media. Please remember, media is 24/7 into 365. They need to be fed constantly. They have bulletins every 30 minutes. They need information. And if you are not there to provide them credible information, somebody else will fill the gap. Then they will go for some unsubstantiated information. So it is our responsibility that I am today available 24/7, my phone is available, and that ensures that any media person, because I am heading a university with 1 lakh plus students, and they are all young students, Now, if I can do it, I'm sure that, my phone is working 24/7. Sometimes media people call me up at 10 in the night, 11 in the night. I give them a response. Because if I say that, no, only contact my PA, only my this thing, next day, I'm sure there will be reports in the media. But when they talk to, there have been issues when at 10 in the night, people have, senior reporters of leading media have spoken to me. And after speaking to me, they did not even put out the story because I explained the things to them. They said, chodo sir. So I think that we need to have good public relation officers who should be available, particularly in a disaster scenario, to give round-the-clock information to media channels, because any information gap can be misused. Any information gap can lead to because you need to fill up your content, and if you are not giving, somebody else will. These are my, suggestions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Suresh, for giving such a, wonderful, opinion, and very, very clear opinion how to make SOP from the government side also. Because if there is no regular flow of information, then naturally the gap will be filled by unauthenticated and unsubstantiated news. And that is happening most of the time. So I agree. Most of the speakers have said that media has to be trained, coached, and guided what to cover, what not, and how to cover and how not. So I would say that recently one very important step has been taken by the government of India. The UGC has already issued a letter to all the universities and colleges to provide the disaster-related, to run the disaster-related courses, and they have also created a module, I think, in collaboration with the NIDM, and they have uploaded it on their website. So now the media is a crucial response partner in disaster management. It's always kept out of the policy making process, which I was saying, and which Professor Suresh is also mentioning. So media may not be an authenticated sector to make decisions, but it shall be considered at least as an advisory agency. It's proved at many instances that the cooperation among government agencies, media, social organizations, corporate sector is still not yet up to the mark. And the cooperation between these agencies and the media will be very, very useful and fruitful for making disaster management successful. So I would like to say that, yes, some kind of guidebook has to be created. It should be created by the media agencies itself, the media organizations itself. And as Professor Suresh has said that they would be happy to support that. This is a very big announcement he has made as the Vice Chancellor of Makhanlal Chaturvedi Patrakarita Vishwavidyalaya. So such a guidebook will certainly help reporters, particularly the new reporters who take into input while covering disasters and going to the field without any training. So such kind of guidebook will be helpful. And I think Sphere India is also trying to create some kind of guidebook. I'm sure the Sphere India would be collaborating with the Makhanlal Chaturvedi in this regard also. So One more important point I have to make, that I want to say, that bringing disasters related media advocacy as a part of the CSR activities, I think that will bring more positive changes and awareness in the society. We all expect from the media, but we kept out of all such kind of things away to the media, and they are not even part of the CSR activities. So if government considers this to bring them the disaster related media advocacy and make them as a part of the CSR, I think that would be very, very helpful. With these words, I would like to close today's discussion, because we already have crossed our time limits. So thank you very much to all our panelists, and especially Professor Suresh, Major General Bindal, and Mr. Himanshu Shekhar, Shweta Ranjan, and Mr. A.K. Shaji from Kerala, and all other speakers who have joined, Mr. Deepak Parvatiyar, and all other participants who have joined from various parts of the country today, and they have taken out much time to be part of this important deliberation. Thank you very much, and thanks to you all. Would you like to say something, Aisha? Would you like to say?
Yes, sir. So now here we come to the end of a very significant session today. It was such an honor for me to present today's session. On behalf of Spare India, firstly, I would like to thank all the panelists, Mr. K.G. Suresh, Mr. Himanshu Shekhar, Swati Ranjan ma'am, Major General Mk Bengal, K. Shaji, and Mr. Deepak Parvatiyar. Thank you for taking out time from your busy schedules to grace the session. And thank you for inspiring and encouraging us with your words in today's session. I cannot forget the active participation of all the others who joined us today, and your suggestions, and we have duly noted all of them. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A very special thanks to Mr. Omkareshwar Pandeyji for moderating today's session. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Omkareshwar sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Suresh sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, General Bindal sir. Thank you,
Thank you.
Professor
Thank you.
Suresh.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Shaji, and thank you, Shweta.